We're ready. Oh.
There, perfect.
Okay, we're getting started. It's officially now that the recorder has started. We'll get started. I want to thank each of you for being here. We have a full agenda. We'll try to run through it as efficiently as we can, which means that in that process, there may be times where I gently nudge people to move along, as opposed to long meandering conversations. There's some new people around the table or on the outskirts of the table. So we'll just kind of have everyone introduce themselves, and we'll start over on this side.
Hi, I'm Lynn Morrison. I'm with Ambient Energy, part of the public today.
Okay, thank you.
Are we doing everybody? Or?
Yeah. Actually, everybody's got to speak up because we have the RV show behind us, and so I can barely hear anybody.
My name is Juan Veloz, Eliria, CAC.
Thank you.
I'm Nolan Miguel of Focus Points Family Resource Center.
Ed Nichols with the Event Planning Advisory Committee.
I didn't know we were standing up. Terrence Carroll, National Western.
Kelly Lead, Executive Director of the NWC-CAC for hopefully not that much longer, and Executive Director of the new office in the National Western Center.
Paulie and Bruce, National Western Stock Show.
Ann Hayes with Westfield Company, owners of the Can't hear you, Ann. Just the future reference.
Oh, well, there's a lot going on.
I'm Celia Vanderloop. I'm with NDCC. Ann Seagrand is Jones JJJ Properties, and I'm an alternate.
Heather Lafferty, Habitat for Humanity. Carrie Atia is in Denver.
Jim Garcia, new member of Connecticut Council on
How are you?
Next, stand up to Denver. Gretchen Colorado with the city, Renee Denver of the city's deputy CFO, and also Deputy to Kelly on the mayor's office in Nashville.
I'm Christopher with AECOM, contractor with the City of Denver for the National Western Center project.
Liana, get to introduce yourself.
Thanks. Sorry for being late. My name is Indiana.
I won't let the councilman introduce himself because he's a politician and they talk too long. So, go ahead, Albus. Never mind.
Albus Burns, District 9, good to see y'all.
So I'll do my best to be as loud as I possibly can be, because you know I'm a wilting flower, so I'm not heard very clearly most times. So we'll start with our partner updates. I don't see Jocelyn. I don't think is here tonight, and so we'll skip over CSU. Paul.
Okay, National Western update. I'll talk loud. Sorry about the crowd, but at the end of the day, we're going to make some money today. So there were 686,000 plus visitors to the National Western Stock Show in 16 days in January. That is the second highest attendance in the history of the stock show, but it will be the best financial year we've had because prices have gone up since the record was set long ago. The difference was the Hispanic market. The Hispanic market drove attendance on the 2 Bronco Sundays and sold out our final rodeo. We're pretty darn close. I would say the crowd was at least 50% Hispanic that day. When the Broncos were playing the Patriots, and our grounds was easily that. So our Hispanic marketing initiatives worked well. And see, they were smarter than everybody else because they knew the Broncos were going to win. There was no need to watch that game. So we had very strong results from all the events that fund our scholarship trust. There are 4 events that fund our scholarship trust, of which we, the National Western, don't get any revenue from. It all flows through to the trust. Those 4 events are the Citizen of the West Dinner, the Junior Livestock Auction, the Coors Art Western Art Show, and the Boots and Business Luncheon. Those 4 events go straight to the Scholarship Trust, so they will fund over $400,000 net this year that will go to students that are practicing in agriculture and rural medicine across Wyoming and Colorado. There'll be more than 80 students impacted. Second, we will close in 2 weeks on the junkyard property at 51st and Brighton Boulevard. So I mentioned that about 6 months ago to this group. I want to remind everyone that the Western Stock Show Association will close on that property next to the post office here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. In the short term, it will be used for parking. We have to have it in the short term for parking. In the long term, we know it's part of the Elyria Globeville Swansea plans, and we'll be working with you versus the marijuana business that would have ascertained that property should we not have bought it. So that is a done deal a couple of weeks from now. RTD, we have closed and settled with RTD. RTD's construction will start very quickly. They are going to have many, many trucks in here tearing up the land. They're going to have lots of trucks traveling whichever way they travel to get here. So I just want to kind of make sure the group in the area here is aware. In 2 weeks or so, they'll be laying down track through our property and bringing major trucks in here, hauling things in, hauling things out. So I don't have any control of what they're doing as far as how they're doing it and so forth. I sit in a meeting with them about every 2 weeks. Ron Rohr is my designated representative in those meetings, and he is trying to follow the progress of what they'll be doing, but they technically own the land now necessary to complete the rail across our property, so they don't need to ask me for permission. They have it in the agreement that we've signed. There's a letter that we signed for Starbuds. I think that Liz is going to pass that out so you all have a copy. We have continued to be staunch in, I suppose the right term is protest of anything marijuana related in or around this area. We feel like we maybe have some standing in this particular argument, although we didn't have any standing the last time I did this, and many of you in this room basically testified along with us in opposition of marijuana and medical marijuana in the area, or at least retail marijuana. So, you now have a copy of the letter. We are starting our capital campaign. We have to raise $50 million for completion of the National Western Center plan. Ron Williams is the head of our fundraising committee, and that'll complete our $125 million that we're pledging into this project. So $125 million total will come in from the National Western Stock Show and the Western Stock Show Association. $50 million of that will be cash. The rest will be in land transfers. The Venture Foundation awarded us a grant about 6 months ago, allowed us to understand how to organize ourselves to raise that kind of money. And without their help, we would have never been able to afford that study. So we had a good study done by 3 leading experts in fundraising. Let's see, lastly, we're putting together a RFI, request for information, for those of you who don't know the acronym, to engage companies that are experts in the valuation and naming rights and sponsorship values to set the rate card across the National Western Center grounds. So today at the National Western Complex, I have a sponsorship team that has a rate card. That rate card tells them how much the front door of the National Western entrance would be if you wanted to be a sponsor of that. I would never let you one-off that asset, by the way. You would have to buy multiple things to get that asset. So the rate card at National Western Center will be identified over the course, we hope, of the next 3 to 4 months. That will include naming rights of the buildings. And we are going to continue to engage the community, all of you, in regard to our naming rights process as we move with Kelly and CSU through this. But rest assured, the naming rights are a very difficult sale. I don't want all of you to think, hey, there's going to be 1,000 companies lined up to put naming rights on our buildings. There's not going to be. And there's not going to be, not because they're not great. It's a very difficult thing to sell. And it's difficult because it's expensive. I know that from selling the Dick's Sporting Goods Park deal. I know that from being part of Pepsi Center's deal, and I know that from the First Bank Center in Broomfield. These are years of prospecting, years of presentations. One thing I assure you from my chair on any naming right we own, we are not going to engage any companies that might embarrass us, any companies that might embarrass you. We're not going to sell into the marijuana business. We're not going to sell into the pornography business, okay? Those are assets and companies we will not associate with as an association. I don't do it today, and I'm certainly not going to do it at the National Western Center. So as we move along this process and bubble up the top 200 or so prospects, some of them will be international and some will be national. And we will keep you in the loop as we go through that. But we're months away from our first presentation because we have to have the values before we can go present. Okay, so that was my report. Happy to answer a question or two.
So I really appreciate how difficult it is to phrase commercial value and market and sell anyways. And I get that you're addressing that very directly. On the values, and I appreciate very much, I totally trust your judgment on the non-embarrassment and all that. I think Scott does a great job of that. On the values, I would like to be sure we have an open conversation here about the types of industries relative to the evolution of agriculture and how this wants to be a visionary, forward-looking group. Because there are controversies that we'll have to talk about. There are very well-built companies that do types of agriculture that may or may not be the future of agriculture, might in some ways be commercially the most able to. And I'm intentionally not naming names.
Right.
But can you describe to us how we can have input as an advisory committee with you in the development of this early on in the process so that can become like a position paper, a value position with the RFI?
Yeah, I think probably because the RFI AE is really so 5,000 foot level, there's really no need for any of us to get really too involved in that. The company that will be awarded this when the partners decide who it should be, and the partners are CSU and the city here, that's the time that we can then maybe have them come in and be a presenter here, and we can start talking through, tell us about your process, tell us about how you're going to be bubbling up prospects, those sort of things, as part of their analysis of how we should go out and sell naming rights. So I think we're still too far ahead of the process today, but we will engage them once we get to the point of a company that might make sense.
Thank you. It's a relief just to be sure it's on the timeline and we've identified that as something important we need to have on the agenda.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions for Paul? Seeing none. I don't think we have anyone from the Museum of Nature and Science. Ed, are you speaking on behalf of History Colorado, or are you exclusively Ed now?
Well, History Colorado is going to continue to be involved, but at this point, I have stepped down from that role. Steve Turner will be taking that role in the future.
Okay, thank you. Community representative reports. We'll start with Drew and/or both.
Mike, do you?
The mic's right there.
The mic's right there. Can we get you the noise? I wonder if we can pull it over for you.
It's on.
Be more formal tonight.
Hello.
Yeah, Mike's good.
So,
It's open mic night.
this is my stand-up.
Show us what you got.
So I'm the neighborhood representative on the executive oversight committee for the National Western, and we had a retreat last Friday. It was lasted all day long. It was at the mayor's mansion, Cable Land, former Bill Daniels' house. And that was very exciting. Most of the city people were at this. Eric, Barb, Kelly, Maria was there. And I think it was kind of, it was pretty inspiring, I think, because I think they tried to generate a lot of interest. They showed portions of President Kennedy's moon speech, which I've always enjoyed very much. It's kind of a longer speech, but they showed the one part of it where he talked about why we're going to the moon. And I think that's setting a very, very high bar for this project. But I think it's also something that we can relate to. These are things that we aspire to, and we don't know where we're going. But it's a journey that, in that case, it took 10 years, a little less, as I remember, maybe about 10 years plus. So I thought that was kind of a nice relation of this project, to man's quest to go to the moon. What we're doing here is very unique, I think. That was it. I can probably go into some of the details at that retreat. And we have sort of a little subcommittee of residents here that I think we're getting together once a month, and so I can go into more details about that. And then today's executive oversight committee had some pretty interesting things in it, but I think, as usual, I'll let Eric probably speak to that. They're probably aging better. I'll try to do a little better preparing for this. It's just been a really hectic time today, so I'll try to report in a little more detail what's going on. But I'm happy to speak with anybody at any time about anything that pertains to the Executive Oversight Committee. So, thank you.
Any questions for Drew before you get away? Okay. No question. Armando. I feel like Simon Cowell's sitting right here now over there.
Gracias, bienvenidos. Just real quick, the Finance Committee did not meet last month. As many of you know, Ms. Kennedy is transitioning with the city, and so therefore we didn't meet, and Gretchen is taking the lead role in that, and as a result of that, we'll be, hopefully this month, March, hopefully we'll get together and get back on track. So that's going to be the transition phase, and we'll get reorganized on that and moving forward. Gretchen is here to facilitate any specific questions, but at this point in time, we don't have anything to report. Thank you.
And Gretchen's up on the agenda a little later. AE.
The Events Program Advisory Subcommittee has had 2 meetings deferred, canceled due to conflict of responsibilities with waiting members of the committee that have been working diligently to put together the bond measures, etc. I'm sure smoke is coming out of their ears in various corners on that. I hope that we can, I don't know if we're just going to do the April one and not trying to schedule, Kelly. Can you answer that?
I think we'll pick it up in April.
Okay. So I just want to express to the group, as the EPA's representative, my heartfelt, deeply soulful concern that I don't want it to feel like conflict, but I'm very, very concerned from within the neighborhoods that we're neglecting the potential of the EPAS to create, for lack of a better word, soft programming now along the thematic content of what the National Western Center is becoming. And I'm trying to have conversations with other members of the EPAS, where we can talk about this. There are magnificent, large picture, great institutional facilities development, conceptualizing development happening. There's amazing conversations going on coming out of CSU with concepts of the regenerative sustainability models and how this will become educational. And yet within the neighborhoods where there has been expressed interest in some of these programs having to do with the areas where we're going to be mentoring enterprise, creating locals of the economy by having enlightened urban farming and soil sciences as a as part of this, and I feel like we're falling behind. We're moving into the second cycle of CSU's soils health awareness program, which I think is fantastic, and the strategy has shifted from that. It's been moved to the back burner, and CSU isn't here to report, but I'm going to mention that they're amping up relationships with 4-H in a broader sense, which I think is great. I love 4-H, but I really feel, and I'm struggling, folks. I want help. I really feel we're missing some opportunities to amp up direct engagement of parents, teachers, students, residents, and other folks that are really ready to start to take up some of the content and sort of soft programming leading into engagement with the National Western Center thematic areas. And I'm sorry I can't be clear about what this is because I don't think we have revealed the context to talk about it well enough. So I just ask people to consider that. So I hope people will somehow find a seat in that to talk, because I really do feel there are a lot of people that we can get engaged in the neighborhoods now to become interested as they go forward with some educational things and some activities and things in the neighborhood.
Just any
So
upcoming
on
meetings.
March 19th, there's going to be a
Any
Walk
upcoming
for the
meetings?
Revolution activity here at Swansea Rec Center, and I'm hoping to have a nice NWC presence there. I know Ron Moore is the contact at the Stop Show, so I'll be talking to him about that. And we'll be having some of the soil health awareness kids there. So that's what I can tell you.
And will you tell me the date again of the Warm Cookies event?
March 19th.
March 19th.
It's kind of it's an afternoon thing. I don't have a specific time. I think the prior ones have been like from 1 to 5 or 12 to. I don't have that. We'll be going into it yet. And anybody wants to participate in it, I'd love. Let's have it. Come on up. We want to have an NWC-CAC presence there. I'm going to get a bunch. I just talked to the soil health enrichment folks today. I'm going to have some kids there. I've already got 6 going, and I really feel that there's a continuum from that soil health enrichment, that soil health monitoring test kit to the actual delivery of the produce out of the urban farm on your land. And National Western Center can have that brand. It's really enjoyed when I walk up to people in the neighborhoods and say, hey, see us, you can test your soil. They say, oh, heavy metals. And I say, no, nutrients, grow things. It's an immediate change in the self-awareness of what we have emerging in the neighborhoods. I'm all for it.
Hey, I'm Kelly with the review of the public meeting schedule.
So we don't have the equipment?
Good evening. So relative to public meetings, so one is, and I noticed it was a request that came out of this committee, was making sure that at a minimum the NDCC website is up to date on all the meetings. So when you go now to the site, that schedule is being updated weekly by staff now. Obviously we're pushing out meeting notices as those occur. But that schedule is up to date, and we're really on the team to make sure that those schedules are up to date. So that's one. Two, one of the things that came out of the retreat on Friday is a work plan for the year. And one of our challenges right now is that both the CAC and the EOC meetings happen to fall on the same night. So one of the things we'll be working through on the work plan is to make sure that we stagger content so that it can be in front of this group before it goes to the EOC. So that'll be one of the things the team is working on. And what we'll be able to do is at the March CAC meeting is walk folks through a proposed schedule of content for meetings, which will include any sort of other ancillary public meetings that we need to have on a whole range of topics. And how do those intersect? How does the National Western related functions and topics overlay with the NDCC topics? So between now and our next meeting in March, we'll be able to show you or produce to this group at least the first really good cut at a public schedule that we'll want your feedback on. Because the other part is that we have this feedback, obviously, is some topics more than others require more time. You need more time to digest the material, to talk about it. And you have small group meetings That's certainly something that Drew has shared a variety of times, giving people enough time to look at the material. So that'll be another piece of our work, is to make sure that we are giving you guys the time you need to process and to talk and then actually have a robust conversation. So again, always open to feedback, but I think the more immediate things of making sure schedules are up to date, that content's up to date, etc., is out there so that folks know what's going on and what about. Any questions for me?
Representatives chosen from the CAC. Really great opportunity. And that was one email from the EOC I did not receive. I didn't receive it. I'm just asking
AE,
for future reference if there's a possibility these work sessions could be
AE, can we speak up? We can't hear. We can't hear you.
Drew, could you repeat the question if you heard it?
I was just asking Kelly. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Operatic. It was put on the EOC. I voiced it at the EOC meeting when this was announced that there would be a work session and a retreat and a work plan for the Executive Oversight Committee. That it would be a really constructive opportunity to have the EPAS and the CFAS, the two subcommittee leadership, and the elected representatives from this group to participate in that. And so it was a big letdown to me that invitation wasn't extended, because I feel like we really, would be appropriate, basically, and we need to expand that, not that the EOC be an exclusive executive, but a part of an advisory and decision-making process. And I just want to ask if that was done intentionally, and if we can change that model as we go forward and strengthen this governance feedback. It was kind of disappointing.
So it's a great question, and I'm happy to answer it. I mean, the retreat was an executive oversight committee retreat. So although there were 38 people there in total that attended that, a large contingent from the city and the two other equity partners, CSU and National Western, were there. Drew was representing EOC. The intent was, the EOC, the 9 members of the EOC are intended to be the decision makers for content that rolls up from this group and from the two subcommittees to ultimately inform the mayor about decisions in moving this project forward. So it was the inaugural retreat of that body to actually start acting as a governing body. It was not, certainly there was no intent in sliding this body. In fact, I said today that I would publish the report from the retreat and make it available to the public to show you there were no decisions made at the retreat. I mean, Drew's nodding his head. It was really informational, both around big issues as well as some really minutia-related things around work ahead of us. So, I think going forward, look, we're going to always find places where this body can participate and the elected representatives from this committee can participate. But in that specific case, that event was for the Executive Oversight Committee members and the key staff members that ultimately have to do this work on this project.
I was just going to say, EPAS was the event planning committee was represented there. Both George and I were there.
Yeah, it would be nice to have somebody like AE there, or some other residents. I mean, it would be nice to see some of the residents engage with Tony Frank and some of the other key individuals, not just the decision makers. I think that's I agree with you. You're saying no decisions were made, that's fine, but and I think the focus of this group is to be inclusive, not exclusive, and let us engage even where possible.
And to link this to the agenda item, there was a request, because I made it early on in the committee and subcommittee process, that the conversation happened about the relationship between the 3 committees. And that was never formally part of the conversation. I think that's that uncertainty. And it's not just whether decisions are made or not, it's the collective consciousness and the ability to understand the process. And I probably feel that's part of the mentoring and training and insight we need on the EPAs and the CACs. So I'd like to make sure we go to that depth, and then I'll just stop there because I think some of that conversation is going to come into what we talk about now.
All right. John.
I've got some rather strong feelings about
John, speak up, please.
I've got
Speak
some
up.
really strong feelings about this issue, but I don't think I want to bog you down right here today. I think we can probably take it up in item number 5 on the agenda. At least I'd like to speak to at least share my perspective about that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kelly? Thank you, Kelly. We'll move on to project updates. We'll start with the site environmental assessment update. And it promises to be thrilling. I always get excited about the site environmental assessments.
Oh my God, it took me 58 minutes to get here from East Denver.
Let me start by introducing myself, and I'm going to stand forward. Let me know if you can't hear me because I want to be able to point stuff. I'm Celia Vanderloop. I'm the Environmental Project Coordinator for NWC-CAC. And I'm here to talk about our environmental investigations of the site. We want to do environmental investigations of the property so that we can understand both whether there are any human health concerns, and then also so that we can understand so we can protect health during the construction and during the long-term use of the site, and so that we can improve the environmental, the redevelopment planning and the cost estimating. Because this is a historically industrial area, there's a reasonable chance that environmental costs will be significant. And so the more we know about environmental issues up front, the better. So what we did, we looked at the entire National Western Planning area and conducted a records review on that. So there's a variety of sources that you can use to identify what historical uses were. This area was industrial for over 100 years, so there's a strong likelihood there's residual from some of that industrial uses. So we're looking at sandboard maps, which are insurance maps, aerial photos, historical phone books, and trying to identify where various buildings and uses were. And then for the National Western Stock Show and city-owned properties, we did interviews with the site managers, and we did site visits, and then we did field investigations. So today I'm going to talk about the field investigations. And some of these slides I'm going to blow through fairly fast because I was out here before and talked about it once. So I'm going to go through pretty fast, but if you have any questions, please stop me, or we can answer questions at the end. So this is the primary study area, and you'll see this is focused on the area that is owned by National Western and some cities. And in this area, as I said, we did interviews and site visits, and then we did field investigations. So we installed monitoring wells to look at groundwater and also to look at what was in the soil profile before you get to groundwater. We did soil borings of surface soils. We did soil vapor sampling, and we did test pits. So here's what we found. In surface soils, we sampled both from 0 to 6 inches and from 6 to 24 inches. And I apologize, this is hard to look at. But as you can see on here, almost all of it is green, which means we found everything that was green was below residential soil cleanup levels. There's a few spots that are yellow. And those larger spots are the 6 to 24 inch depth. And those exceed residential cleanup levels, but they are below industrial cleanup levels. And then there's one small spot that's red, and that is the 0 to 6 inch sample, and that sample at that location exceeded the industrial cleanup level. Now, while on the one hand it looks like we did a lot of sampling, this is really a large area. So of course when we get into more detailed planning, we will be doing much more sampling and better defining. This is intended to give us a level view of what we need to think about.
Question, what's the difference between residential and industrial?
Okay. So the way that the
Hey, Celia,
repeat
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
She asked what the difference is between residential and industrial cleanup levels. The way the regulatory agencies, which would be the State Health Department and the Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level, establish cleanup levels is they look at risk for a certain type of user. So if that user was a residential user, they would be looking at if a child was there playing in the soil every day and got their hands dirty and then had their hands in their mouth, and so they'd be looking at exposure that way. And they have established that a safe level is 400 milligrams per kilogram, which is parts per million, and I know this jargon, I don't know how to explain it better, for residential. So when we say it's below residential, it's below 400 milligrams per kilogram. And for industrial, similarly, they were saying an industrial worker would have these types of exposure. They'd be out 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They would, potentially get their hands dirty, moving equipment around, and then they would be, comparing that to a level of health concern for an industrial worker. And for an industrial worker on lead, the cleanup level is 800 milligrams. So these yellow ones were between 400 and 800, and this one red one is over 800, but it was really only slightly above. I believe it was about 860, but I don't quote me on that number. It wasn't that much higher. So here is the sampling results for arsenic in soil. Again, we sampled 0 to 6 inches, 6 to 24, and you can see every sample is green here, meaning that we had no soil samples that exceeded the residential cleanup level, which is really good news. To be honest, on both of these soil sampling results, that was very good news. It was much better than we expected, frankly, and so we're happy to hear that. So, and again, I apologize for the visual quality on this. This is data from our test pits and monitoring well locations. And you can see the purple are historic buildings that used to be on the property that are no longer there. So along here, when you look at records, you see that there were a fair amount of rendering plans and other type of things that would have been animal processing. There was a blood manufacturer, and there's a variety of different things. And so there's a whole variety of uses out here. So these purple are where buildings used to be. And until probably 40 years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, when people constructed, often they just knocked the building down and built right over the top. So we, both in our monitoring well locations, which are these red dots, and then in these green dots, we looked for buried debris. And where our monitoring well samples showed buried debris, then we go out and do test pits. So one thing you notice is we don't have test pits on this side, because our monitoring well borings, which went below where we'd expect anything to have been buried, did not show any buried debris. On the other hand, over here in our test pits, we saw a great deal of buried debris. Good news on that is that buried debris sampling, we did not see any asbestos. Often, if a building is more recent than, say, 1950s or so, there's asbestos in the buildings. Many of these buildings are quite a bit older than that, so like they might have insulated. We found some insulation that was horsehair based. So there's different products in there. But so this is really, buried debris is not really as much of an environmental concern. It is more of construction planning concern, because when somebody builds out there, they're going to have a lot of material to build, and they're going to have to worry about their foundation workshops. Next slide. So in groundwater, we did find a problem. We found a perchloroethylene plume, which is an industrial solvent, often used in dry cleaning, but also used in other industrial processes. And it's used like as a degreaser. This plume is coming on the property, and then it kind of diffuses out. It's fairly narrow here, and then it diffuses out, and it's following the groundwater. We went out and did some additional investigation on that, because we originally had wells like right here, and we didn't know how far back it went. And were able to show that it was coming on site from an off-site location, and so we were able to define our perimeters a little better and understand that we did not really have a problem here, but we do have groundwater contamination on site coming from an off-site location. We did look to see if we have any evidence of use of that shallow groundwater. We were not able to find that. We still need to follow up and make sure of that. We are still working through, how to approach this. Our biggest concern there would be is if there was a human health exposure, if somebody was drinking that water, and we don't have any evidence of that. So this is groundwater in nitrates, and you can see that the green, which is many of our monitoring wells, are below the drinking water standard. And then the yellow is above the drinking water standard, but below the agricultural standard. And those are standards that are established by the state health department and the federal government. Excuse me. So they're relatively low levels of nitrates, which could be expected as a residual of long-term animal operations, and or there's historic landfill here, and historic landfill here, and historic landfill over there. And often nitrates are associated with historic landfills. So this is not really that big of a concern. Again, nobody, as far as we can know right now, is using that surface, that upper level groundwater. So we went back, and because we had that groundwater plume, we wanted to look at soil vapors. One way that a groundwater plume can cause a human health concern is that if the vapors are evaporating from the groundwater, moving up through the soil and moving up into the overlying buildings. We looked at the concentrations. Oh, thank you so much. I'm trying to talk loud. So we looked at the concentrations in the vapor column in those wells, and we compared those to levels that are established by the state health department, and they were not of concern. We went back and we did some additional sampling to be sure it was still not of concern. That is something that we will continue to follow and monitor again, because that's not always a real consistent measurement, but at the same time, now I'll try not to shout at you. At the same time, the vapors are, we want to keep an eye on them, but our indications right now are those vapors are not of concern. The methane concentrations, and as I mentioned, there's old landfill here, old landfill here, old landfill here. And so we wanted to make sure that we did not have methane migration issues. We got a hit here. We went back and looked at that additional contaminants there, and it's kind of got a funny signature in terms of what contaminants were showing up. It was indicative of natural gas, and sure enough, when we contacted Excel, there was a small natural gas leak there that they fixed, so that was serendipitous. However, we did also see some elevated methane concentrations up here next to the site, which were of concern to us because they had migrated off that property. We went and did additional investigations, looked at those methane concentrations, and so this is that bus barn property looked at in a little more detail. We coordinated with Denver Public Schools, which owns the property. Denver Public Schools was very responsive. They went out and installed a ventilation system. We've gotten their first round of monitoring results back, and that ventilation system is working. The off-site concentrations have gone down and are no longer a problem, and we will continue to keep an eye on them. So just to really summarize quickly, we do have low levels of metals in the surface soils. We intend to address those as part of construction planning and actual construction. We do have a fair amount of buried debris, which will be addressed during planning and construction. We will be continuing to investigate the groundwater contamination that's in the southwest corner of the site. We will continue to watch the methane concentrations and make sure that that venting system continues to work. We are right now doing additional characterization and site assessments on buildings when they're moving through the acquisition process. And then we will also be doing, we will be further characterizing the buildings that are on the National Western property during the construction planning. We have been in and walked through those, and there is no reason to be of immediate concern, but certainly when those buildings, when some of them are demolished, or portions of them are demolished, we will need to address environmental issues at that time. And then when there's land acquisition, we need to do site assessments and environmental investigations at that time.
Does any of your investigation involve looking at floodwaters in the area?
The question was, has the investigation involved looking at floodwaters in the area? And no, it has not. Let me caveat that a little bit. We have looked at the Flow 2D, the modeling of flooding north of the highway and how that will be affected by all the various projects. It will be improved, but we have not looked at quality of the floodwaters moving through, if that was your question.
Well, there's a concern about the floodplain.
And
essentially some of the early indications, the city of Denver is requiring that structures be 4 feet above ground based on the Corps of Engineers study. And I wonder how that's going to affect what happens on the site.
So there's two separate things going on, and one is the Corps of Engineers study, and the other is the relooking at the floodplain mapping. And I am just not knowledgeable enough to talk knowledgeably about those. I'm sure we could have someone, I have some knowledge, but I would really prefer to believe that for someone who's really knowledgeable.
Is there someone who's looking at that, or as you say, if you can get someone, that would be extremely helpful?
I would assume we could get someone, yes. The city has people who are knowledgeable on that.
The other question is on Heron Pond. Understand the levels of pollution are really significant. They can't be cleaned up. Did you look at Heron Pond at all?
The city has been involved or either aware of and looking at or doing our own work on Heron Pond for quite a number of years. As you were right, there are contamination in that sediment. And we are kind of talking through what's the right way to approach that as a part of the Northside Park Master Planning.
Thank you.
My question is more of a concern of the water table. Our water table throughout this entire area fluctuates substantially. And with that water table, have you looked at the amount of contamination that moves around? So in one part of the year when it's drier and the water table's down low, you get one reading. And then during the time that on high level precipitation, when we get a lot of rains and things like that, the water table rises, it has a tendency to move the contamination around. And I'm wondering how you are viewing that and how you can approach a situation where you have a water table that consistently moves around.
So I would agree that water table fluctuates up and down, but in general the flow direction of the water is consistent. Even when it's high, it's always moving towards the river and discharging to the river. So if we went back to that map that showed the groundwater plume, that general pattern of how that perfluoroethylene is going to move is going to stay the same regardless of the elevation of the groundwater, because it's always going to be moving in this direction. And that kind of follows the topography of the land as well. Am I answering your question?
Not specifically, because in certain areas you have some systems that you have to install with the types of foundations that you're going to be putting in. And these some systems will be picking up this groundwater that possibly could be contaminated and then injected in different places. And I guess my concern is when that water table begins to rise and lower, and I've seen it rise as much as 6 feet.
Yeah.
some system picks this up and discharges it, then what's the possibility of some of that contamination being discharged in areas that it should be?
So this work was done in June, July of this last year. And we had a pretty wet spring, so we think we got the groundwater table when it is pretty high. And it was still a fair ways low, or it was generally 20 feet down or more. And so my understanding from talking with Eric about the plans for buildings is that we don't have any buildings we're intending to cut anywhere close to that. That's correct, isn't it, Eric?
Yeah, specifically on the west side of the BN tracks, everything is slab on grade. So the only thing that we'll be excavating would be for underground utilities and for foundations, which likely would be drilled. There's no actual excavation for subgrade parking or basements or anything like that.
Okay, this is kind of answered. Well, actually, I was just going to ask about, like, in the public
Drew. Sorry.
You know, as far as the, this might do. So for the public realm, you might have sort of park-like areas where there's grass or whatever, where people can sit down and play. So that, of course, has to be remediated. So, did you want to?
So Drew's asking about the public realm and any open areas where we would be encouraging, in a way, people to sit and recreate on the ground. So those areas, the sampling that we have, as I said, it's not anywhere near enough sampling. The sampling that we have indicates that much of the property would be below cleanup levels. We would go back and for individual, like when an individual park or plaza area was built, we would go back and do more detailed sampling so we are sure, because there were some slightly elevated lead levels. And we would, if we're in an area, say, where you'd be expecting a family to have a picnic or something like that, we would not want to leave those concentrations in place. So when we're building that, we would go back and resample, and if it's above that action level, then it would be remediated. If it's not, we would probably just come over the top with topsoil and vegetation, because there's no real reason to excavate materials that don't need excavating. Hey, John.
Hi. Thank you for all the work that you've done. I have one question in reference to Eric's statement. You're going to be moving somewhere, obviously, for footings, foundations.
Could you speak up a little, John?
The dirt that's going to be removed in construction will, even though it's minimal, what are you going to do with it? Or is it too early to tell you?
It's a little bit too early to tell. In general, if that soil is contaminated, it's going off-site and it will go to Denver Arapahoe disposal site. If that soil is clean enough to be reused, we might think about reusing it on-site if we need to build a little hill here or build up a foundation. But there will be a determination made first of, is this clean dirt or is this dirty dirt? And if it's dirty dirt, it's going off.
Off to where?
Off to Denver Arapahoe disposal site.
Not the Grove.
No.
Way out east, John.
Quincy and 470. Okay. Thank you. I don't think there are any more questions.
Thank you, Celia.
So we'll go to the economic study scope with Gretchen. Should it be scope study or is it study scope?
We haven't caught up very long.
Yeah.
We haven't seen each
I'm like
other.
looking at this and this is not ordered to
Yeah.
So we're talking about the scope of our.
yeah, better.
So we're something that's more precise.
So just ignore my comments.
All right, we're up. So good evening, everyone. My name is Gretchen Laura. I work for the city of Denver. I've been louder.
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Use your coaching voice, Gretchen.
My name's Gretchen. I work for the city. I've worked for the city I've worked for the city for the past 15 years, and I'm currently the city's deputy CFO, and I'm taking on a new role to help support Kelly and the team on the National Western Center. And the project that we are talking about with you tonight briefly is the perfect intersection of those two things. It's an economic study to accompany the other work that's been done on the site. And actually, I'm going to move to the front so I can see the screen and you can hear me better. I also want to introduce Chris Brewer, who's here from our consultant team, AECOM. And this project is really at the initial stages of what we are doing. So the city with partners and through the Executive Oversight Committee of the National Western helped to create a project scope. I know that Drew, I think AE, you guys were both present at that. And it's really to look at the site with this economic lens, to add to the lens that's been there for the National Western Center, stock show purposes, for what CSU is bringing to the site for education and research, and to add this economic component to the site with really the overall goal to be, with the amount of investment that city, taxpayers, other partners are bringing to the site, how can we work to ensure that the site is as economically viable in the future as possible? So today is the day we kicked off two efforts. We met earlier today with our technical advisory committee. That is a bunch of economists, like Chris. And when he walks through his scope, what he's going to do today is pass out his scope of work. We only have 10 minutes here today, so we're going to have some leave behinds for you, and I'll pass out my cards because we're going to have to get input offline. And then also, obviously, tonight we're here with you all to get this study kicked off. What we will do with these work products that come out, there'll be a series of technical memos that then feed into a total study. So as we get those technical memos, we'll bring those back to you so you have a chance to comment, review, look at them before we have any kind of a final report. We expect that report to be complete in June. And then just for context, what we can accomplish with this study is to really take things that we have been handed from CSU, and I passed around a copy of the executive summary of the CSU study that we want to build off of. And it's worth reading. I've encouraged everyone to read the full study, but at the very least, please read the executive summary. It identifies 13 clusters of ag, and Colorado and the Front Range's unique position in clustering those ag sectors and the innovation that occurs around them, and how we position this site as the front door to the Front Range and ag innovation. That's, in a nutshell, what this study is supposed to accomplish. 13 sectors, and they're on page 5, which is labeled B, Roman numerals, on your study, but it talks about dairy production, it talks about microbrewing, it talks about cattle and food safety. You'll see those 13 sectors. The idea behind the study, most generally, and if you could flip to the next slide, is to fill in that bottom circle. So you'll see what I talked about earlier, that the WSSA and WSS bucket didn't format properly, but it's entertainment and competition. That's how we started this conversation. It's at the heart of the master plan and the heart of the history of the site. CSU is bringing a pretty important component for education and research. We're trying to fill in this, get closer to this economy and commerce piece of the site, and that goes all the way from local companies that we might want to grow to international companies we may want to attract. Keeping in mind with this study, we are not looking at the specific names of companies or recruitment. We are really looking at what is the right area of emphasis for us in terms of these clusters of ag, business, and commerce. So that's just a little bit of an overview, and this is a PowerPoint that we have shown to some of our external parties, just so they're familiar with what the National Western Stock Show does, things that currently happen on the site, things we want to have. In terms of additional community partners, really using the assets of the site to bring entertainment and new tourism dollars to the site. Next slide. Education and resource. These are some of the things that CSU has been talking about with the Equine Sports Medicine and Rehabilitation Clinic. with the Water Resource Center? How do we interface with Denver Public Schools? How do we bring research both to the site and back out to the community? If you've heard Jocelyn Hiddle speak about this, she talks about that porous connection between the site and the neighborhood. And then, next slide. And then these are some framing questions that I'll hand the microphone over to Chris to talk about. But it's how can we look at what sectors we should be focused on, what's our competition regionally, nationally, internationally, how do we build this site as something that is a decades-long economic generator and support to not just the community immediately surrounding it, but to the Denver metro area too, to support our overall regional economy and health. And what's our story? What ag industries should we be recruiting and when? And you'll see that underlined phrase, move it, attract it, grow it, or start it. That's some of the ways that we think about the range of businesses we may want to work with.
Christian, thank you very much. Again, my name is Chris Brewer. She's already broken the news that I am an economist. Please don't hold that against me. Started my 20th year of real estate consulting back in August. Since 2007, been heavily focused around the country looking at transitional industrial districts on the edges of downtowns. Again, there are a lot of cities right now that are going through a not dissimilar set of questions about these older industrial areas. Again, do they stay industrial or transition into other uses? Now again, for our effort tonight, in terms of our framing questions, I will actually tell you to read the full report and not just the executive summary. Being the economist, I had to read the whole thing. And it's actually a very good report. What it does is frame the agricultural opportunity in a much bigger perspective. Again, there are a lot of other markets that look at a piece of the conversation, whereas this document really looks at the whole conversation from cattle production to actual food processing to ultimately the places that sell food and how we consume food. We think in the long term these are going to be a huge set of conversations for this region that we really have to be thinking about. So again, when we look at our framing questions and ultimately how those impact our scope, first and foremost we want to take what we've learned in this study in terms of our core sectors. We want to understand how the state of Colorado is positioned. And again, that gets to competition. I can tell you right now that every other city in the top 20 is thinking about this same space, whether we call it biotech, biomedical, plant and life sciences. There's a lot of interest in the space. There's a lot of cities focused on it. In St. Louis, for example, they've been focused on plant and life sciences for over 20 years. So again, a lot of competition, a lot of activity. We have to understand where we're special and where we stand out. So ultimately in our process, we want to get to sectors that we're strong in. And we want to mate that with what we're calling our target end markets, meaning if you look out over the next 5 to 10 years, what are these sectors that are going to grow the strongest? And where do we have the ability as a district to make the biggest difference in terms of attracting the types of companies that are going to be involved in potentially food processing, maybe research and development, maybe education. Again, there are a lot of different activities we can be thinking about. And ultimately, from a planning standpoint, in terms of how we help the city out, we have to be able to frame the order of magnitude of those opportunities. How many companies, what sort of activities, what sort of clusters do we focus on? Again, we can't be all things to all people. We probably can't have all 12 sectors represented on National Western Center. So what we pick has to be able to drive a lot of activity, but also withstand the test of time. Again, 20, 30, 40 years from now, it's going to evolve, so we have to understand that and plan for it. What we do know from a lot of our research is that place-based activities do matter. So again, we talk about research and development and all those activities. There's a lot of people who realize that we want to engineer a location where people can accidentally, deliberately run into each other. It's an important notion. It seems sort of silly, but that's how a lot of activity happens. Again, it's accidental, but if we engineer a space that's more deliberate, it creates more opportunities for us. So that's the framework. We've provided the scope to. Again, it's very straightforward. We're talking about trying to provide context on other places that do best practices. Talking about international trends in ag we want to think about. We're talking about industry sectors we're focused on, and then ultimately understanding these end markets and how we're positioned in them.
Bruce, I think to meet the overall mission of Colorado State University, what you're proposing here, I don't see it being laid out. From my understanding, that Colorado State University, their overall grandiose mission is to feed the world. what I mean by that statement is I'm talking about poultry, beef, and pork. And the focus of that mission is to find out the most efficient and effective way to feed these animals the most cost-efficient way, where it could put Colorado State University at the forefront. And I don't see that being addressed in the document.
It's a good question because there are multiple conversations going on at the same time. So when you think about the site in a post-ballot world, there is a need to further define, refine what the mission of what it's trying to accomplish is. I believe that this work provides information to that. So this is not meant to answer the overall questions of what is this site going to be 50 years from now. This is to look for things that we would be foolish to miss if Colorado and the Front Range are well positioned to take advantage of this growth in an ag sector. And is this, and the question is, what's the right sector and is this the right place? As we move forward, then we will work with this group, with the EOC, to figure out if this is the right place. I will tell you the other group we are working with on the study is Denver International Airport. With their ballot measure that passed in November 1A, they have 1,500 acres, pilot acres, that they need to figure out what to do with commercial development. And there may be an opportunity, for, as an example, to use the site as a front door to look at next generation research in one of these sectors and use that as a pilot, a demonstration, an education place, but some of the content of how that's being delivered is happening on the airport property. So there's pretty limited opportunities on the site with the public buildings and the master plan that have already been identified. So I would say this is about using the available sites that we have in a smart way to complement the partners in the community that are already here. But understanding what those opportunities are so that we can make decisions about it.
Just a question, Chris, in listening to you talk about kind of what you want to achieve, there's something about accidental intentional.
Chris, can you hand him the mic?
So
we're really competing now.
You were talking about kind of you're trying to sort of program accidental intentional encounters or something, and it seems like we have kind of a campus, and then we also have a neighborhood at the same time, and I'm thinking about I think about Fort Collins and kind of how there's a community that really, there's so much cross-fertilization. You know, there's beer making, and then there's the research university, and then just this populace that's really into healthy, active living, and maybe that's an analogy or something that you could use maybe to, you've probably thought of that, right? So, but just as kind of a you know, an idea.
And again, part of our scope is to identify a number of these places where these sorts of activities happen to different degrees. And again, this is not a scientific conversation. But what we're ultimately talking about is engineering a place or thinking deliberately about a place where people who are doing not dissimilar things can run into each other and have conversations. And I think that's the simple essence we're striving for. But I would say across the country there are many different locations where this comes into play. I think we want to provide you with some of that insight to factor into the planning conversation.
And then I would just emphasize again, if I were to talk about it, I'd say we're at 20,000 feet with the CSU work. This study is trying to take us down to 10,000 so that we can look at where our strengths are and keep going. So there will be more of this work. On my first slide, you know, I think I just called it Econ Study Part 2. And that is to say that when we finish this, so in the next couple of months, we'll be coming back to you with some of the product from Chris and his team at AECOM for you all to comment on before we get to a final report, and also to figure out what pieces didn't fit in the study and what we should do next to follow up on this, because we don't know that yet. But it's clear that there will be something that we should do next to help make this a robust site. Are there any other questions?
Just can you put the document up on the NWC-CAC page?
Yes. And the CSU study. Yes. Any other questions?
Vicki?
This doesn't include the tourist opportunities or the education, at least in these numbered categories, which I think are real great economic opportunities. And is that covered somewhere else?
We were really focusing on commercial sectors with this. If as we go through this, that we need to go back to these two other bubbles and continue to focus on it, I think that's will also be largely driven by the mission of the site as we bring these pieces together. The reason we're starting and focused on this one right now is this is the one we haven't really addressed yet in prior conversations.
Yeah, and I would just say from my own experience, and over the years, done a lot of convention, trade show, industry work. So I think there's interest in how the trade show angle can fit in with the research angle with the other activities. So I think ultimately getting to tourism and that broader set of activities, I think there's curiosity about that certainly.
And I guess I'm particularly concerned about the community, and there's the parks, the businesses that are there that aren't really fitting into any of these categories.
Right. So if the parks and other things that we have talked about aren't really fitting into this study, it's only because this study is catching up. So CSU has its work. You know, a lot of work was done with an SAG report that's also available on the city's website, and it also fed into the application for Regional Tourism Act state sales tax funding. So we looked at a lot of what events could happen on the site. CSU has done a lot of work looking at how to, and they're working still on how to bring research and education to the site. We want to add this third leg of the stool so that we can then put all these conversations together in the way you're thinking. And the goal is not to have this one piece of the pie overrun the others. But it's a missing piece right now, and I feel that we'll be more informed as a community to make choices about what industry, what jobs, how workforce intersects with this if we know what work we might target to complement. Does that answer your question?
Not really.
I'll try again
I'm really
offline after the
concerned to
meeting.
make sure that the people element, particularly in the location and opportunities. I just returned from Vancouver, where they have Science World, which teaches people and attracts tens of thousands of people, and it's basically teaching about these 12 things we're talking about, and whether that is even considered. I mean, it's just a whole area that I think we want to make sure we have 1 million square feet or so of new businesses coming into this area. Just want to make sure that we're not focusing too much on looking at the new, but basically looking at both the existing and opportunities which we haven't seen.
And that's exactly the kind of comment we want. So Chris is here to hear it. It's something we can build into our scope at this point, so we'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nola?
I think my comment is related to Mickey's comment, that just that the community is also interested in wealth building. So are you looking at the innovation that's happening within the adjacent neighborhoods and having that be a part of this as well?
So for this initial effort, we've heard it both ways, that the study goes too far and the study does not go far enough. And I do know that probably will be something that we need to carry forward as one of those next steps, which we will then specifically identify in the study. I can talk to the team to see if we can incorporate some of that work here. I think it's a little more granular than where we're starting. We would want to look at what the front range opportunities are in these industries, and then once we have some of those, how do they plug back into the community surrounding the site, and are they appropriate for the site? But the real thing we wanted to do with this study is take that CSU study and make it more specific just to this place to provide us options. So if we could talk offline about that, about whether there are portions of it we can incorporate with the scope and budget that we have, or if that would be part of our next steps. Any other questions?
Just quickly, the original vision that was discussed at the very first meeting of the National Western Center Citizens Advisory Committee was the stimulus of the
Gretchen, can you give her the?
Sorry, you guys. In the very first NWC-CAC Advisory Committee meeting, when it was convened, there was conversation about the part of the vision for the National Western Center to vitalize the neighborhoods had very much to do with stimulating the local agriculture and autonomous close-in economy, and that part of what would happen at the National Western Center site would be the model farm, demonstration farm, and incubating small businesses. And I think that it's critical from the very outset. I just want to say, I know we're out of time, but from the outset, wealth building is one of the terms some groups are using to describe types of programs. I prefer to talk in terms of economic enterprise and the sovereign wealth of the neighborhoods and getting these things going. And I really think we can do this, and I think it can be fantastic. And then there was also, when we first saw this report here at the CAC about a year or so ago, which was very exciting to discover, it was also mentioned that some of the historic businesses in Global and Larry Swansea should really be focused on from the outset, including Colorado Serum, which pretty much saved the swine industry in our country. And that I would love to see that from the outset, and would want it. There's lots of history, and I'd like that to be elevated immediately within the current scope, now, not later, and look very closely at the existing historic businesses and the small businesses that are also service providers and potential vendors for the law, to see how we can create an economic cluster, much in the model of the Department of Labor's great workforce models that came out a few years ago, where we're looking at the development of economic clusters. So I'm just asking it to be looked at holistically as an economist, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, a little competition here.
All right, thank you for that. We will work to fit as much into this scope as we can, and I'll probably try to make sure I captured all this feedback with the noise. So if you don't mind, AE, stay after, and we can talk about that a little further. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic is the review and discussion of the proposed membership policy. Liz will be passing that around.
Wow. Yeah, this is painful. I'm sorry.
No, we're done.
Yeah, we're all done.
So much more. Colorado needs the national Western Center, which will create new jobs, spur the state's economy, and deliver $6.7 billion.
I think this is the video we've seen, but.
No, this video.
Huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, this video. It's 4 minutes, 39 seconds.
I know. It is 4 minutes, so.
Yeah, we're just got to power through this. What? Huh? No, maybe you should. Liz, it might be easier if you just go through the draft since you're up there. Liz, it may be easier if you go through the draft since you have it right in front of you.
That I was? You want me to? Here. Do you want to just step through? Well, can we set this? I can.
No, man, I'll go around. Oh, I'll go around.
You gonna come around?
Yeah.
This is unfortunately the thank you party for the 500 volunteers for the stock show, which we're competing with.
So for this discussion, I decided to look more forward today.
Okay, we can't turn it on. You're not on.
Thank you. So for this discussion, I decided to look more lawyerly than I normally would on any particular day, just so I can move things along. Just kidding. So in front of you, you have a draft, and I want to thank Liz Adams for doing a draft of the proposed membership policy. And by the caveat here is this is by no means a final product. Oh, I thought it was passed around. Did it get lost somewhere? It was passing around.
You don't have it, Viviana? Oh, it's right here.
ultimately help solve some of the world's most pressing pollution and safety issues.
Is there not extras?
I know that voice.
Nice new look, by the way.
Thank you. It's called Urban Ranch Chic. So I still have my boots on. It's going to be right here on the complex grounds when we get done. So what you have in front of you is actually a proposed draft discussion item only of the proposed membership criteria and policy. So hopefully you'll all have a chance to look at it. I'll just hit some of the high points of it. First, it says the candidates for membership. I think I can do this. Can you hear me okay without this?
No. I want to get you on. Can't. We won't pick it up on the tape. Oh, phew.
I think I'm working okay now. Right here? Okay, works. Okay, so the first item on here just talks about the criteria for membership in terms of where the members should come from. Basically, businesses, representatives or community groups from the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and Rhino neighborhoods. So we're trying to put some type of geographic limitation on this. We could easily have said neighborhoods surrounding or impacted by the National Western, but that would open it up probably too much, because what neighborhood is not impacted by the National Western on some level? And also it says the candidates have to express some interest, and that interest is shown by attending at least 2 meetings and then writing a letter of intent of their desire to actually become members of the CAC. And that letter will be distributed to the members of the CAC prior to any further action being taken. And then following attendance at 2 meetings and the receipt of the letter of intent, the members of the CAC will vote on who that new member is, and that selection will take place by a majority vote. So that's the proposed policy in a nutshell. Comments, questions, suggested revisions?
Well, there's 2 things that I think, I think need to be addressed that are not on here. I'm not sure it belongs here or someplace else. Is number one, that once you're on there, we've always agreed that if you had so many consecutive misses, you would not be. You would be inquired as to whether you wanted to remain on the committee. I believe that we had agreed that it was 3 meetings in a row. So, we understand people have to miss and lives are busy and you guys have a lot to do, and this is all of it, but I think that needs to be in there. The other thing that I think is missing that we want input on is just putting this in the roundup is not enough. When there is a vacancy that occurs or when we want to increase membership, but we really need your thoughts as to how we want to distribute this. Because I'm not quite sure whether, not just posting in libraries or schools or putting it out through networks, what else do we need to do? That's one of the discussions we had last time, that it needs to be more openly discussed instead of just putting it on a roundup that may or may not get enough people out in the community. So those are the other 2 things that we thought that may be missing.
Any thoughts, comments on what Maria just said? Because I do think that we had previously agreed that if you missed 3 meetings during, I don't know, was it during the course of the year, but I think it was at least 3 meetings.
It had to be consecutive.
It had to be 3 consecutive
It had to be consecutive.
meetings. And we've actually gone through that process once already. So any other? What's the opposite missing? Any other comments, thoughts on how we actually distribute this? And
among residents and businesses and organizations. just so that we don't end up, just so that it sets a framework for expectation.
Actually, I think that's worth adding in there.
I think I got a question for clarification here. I'm a little bit confused about this, what we're discussing. As I understood it, there was a range of issues and concerns that were creating a general context for what does the advisory committee do, what are our authorities, how do we want to expand? If so, what would that look like? Do we want to shoot for a percentage of resident members, etc.? And to me, this is probably the smallest mechanism of the entire body of things. I thought that you guys were surveying and vetting in the last month, talking to people. So I'm honestly confused about how to go about even responding to this right now.
I can respond to that. You are correct, and I think when we talked this week, a lot of you have been very gracious. Liz has gone around and scheduled meetings with as many of you as possible. Liliana, we want to thank you for the suggestion because you said it very clear at the last meeting that we should not draft something without having people talk individually. We have learned a lot. You guys have been very focused on giving us thoughts and advice as to how this process ought to be run. We are not through with the entire committee and all the meetings. We thought it was premature to draft that document for circulation at this point, but you are correct, AE, that it is our intent out of this that we would have a broader document. The only thing this is addressing is strictly how to proceed in adding membership, because if you recall, we do have letters from residents already who want to be added to the committee, and we really talked through how we needed to do that. So it is our intent to get done with the balance of all the committee members individually that we've met with. I've been on some of them, but Liz has done the bulk of them, but we have not gone through the whole committee. A lot of you have had, been either out of town or have had other challenges. We'll do as much as possible to work around your schedule to be able to do that, but that's what we're still doing. We thought it was inappropriate to create a document that does not have everybody's input in it at this point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So where that leaves me is that I feel that the whole heart of the process that will finally resolve how we make decisions about membership comes when we finish that discussion.
Okay.
So I'm not comfortable saying, okay, let's go ahead and start selecting members when we haven't finally resolved the things that tie us up when we come to make those decisions. What are we doing to expand if we are expanding? What is the authority of the CAC? What is it that we need mutually beneficially from people that are coming onto it? I appreciate that we did put a member on at our last meeting, but I felt that it was very rushed and that it was kind of a fallback position, and it wasn't as totally respectful as it should be to us really understanding what we're doing. So for me, this would come as something we would finalize, and that we are doing this to stop the pressure of just because somebody somewhere is putting letters, we have to make a decision. We have to make the call, and we have to have a strategy for that, and we have to know what the intent is. So I feel like this is premature for us to decide tonight.
Well,
and we should do it after that.
It's put on it for discussion purposes only. We were not intending for you guys to decide tonight.
Okay, so that's discussion.
Huh?
So that's okay.
Yeah, it says very clearly for discussion purposes. We wanted your input. We've already had some comments. We will basically incorporate it. And then it is our intent to get through the balance of the committee. I think you've met with over half.
No, I've met with... I've met with, or have scheduled 15, and I have 6 people outstanding.
So, yeah. You've been great, Liliana, but yes, so that's for discussion purposes only. It's not intended to be decided tonight.
And certainly, if you want to take this document and review it, and you can shoot me comments anytime, and then we'll incorporate those. We just wanted to start getting some things on paper so that people could start reading and looking and digesting. And, if you want to give me a call and give me comments, if you want to email me comments, and then we'll begin to put those together. But if we just keep talking about it, we don't have something concrete on paper, then I don't think, the group's ever going to be able to kind of have a vote on something. So this was just a beginning point to say that we want to start doing more of these kind of policy statements so that we get that structure that you talked about.
All those things have to be on paper.
Right, yeah, correct.
As I walked towards John because he had his hand about echo what Liz just said, we've been working on this and talking about this for Lord, I'm going to John, Lord knows how many months now. So I don't think it's necessary for us to do everything on the same timeline, but we need to move somewhere and start somewhere. And I think this was an important first step.
John?
Yeah, I agree. We've got issues all around us. Going back to the review of public meeting schedule, right now, just sidelining that, I've got every confidence in the people that are presently doing that job. But I want to make sure that at least try to understand my perspective. I want this group to escalate to another level. We're not going to be able to do it all at the same time because of the varied interests, by the quality of the people we have on this committee. So I think, and I was expecting by now, damn, it's going to be 4th of July before we know it. Winter's going to be behind us, and we're going to be fiddle-faddling around about how to get people on this committee. So I wanted to be task-oriented, and to do so, people will gravitate to their own interests and their own disciplines. But as we were told again, the opportunity will exist for interchange and sharing ideas. But we need to elevate this group to more specifics so that those of you that are working on whatever committees you're on, that we can have constant feedback and reassurance that we are on solid ground to move forward, because we need to move forward now. And we have to be elevated, ourselves and as a group, so that we can share. We got a lot of talent here, and we got to start sharing it so that we can move ahead on it. A lot of that behooves us to do what we need to do for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That kind of really echoes what I was going to say. So I have a couple of comments on this particular draft, and it's tied into also AE's comments about what are the expectations and the role of a member and the time commitment and opportunities for additional participation in committees and et cetera, and what that could mean for different people. And also, usually in boards and things like that, you kind of do a survey, and that can look a whole lot of different ways of what particular types of qualities or expertise we have. So speaking to John, a lot of qualified and people with expertise on different things. So surveying what we have and what we still need, and using that as a way to find sort of the different places or spaces where those folks might be. And so, and being a resident, besides your day job, your expert is being a resident. And so, thinking about how we might do that process here.
Great.
No, you still want to comment?
So I didn't know if we could then call the vote for Candy C. the Vaca that's here today. She's been to 2 meetings. She submitted a letter. She also brings a perspective of, along with being a resident of Swansea, brings a perspective of young people. She works with all the secondary schools within the neighborhood. We don't have a youth presence or voice in this group at all. I think she would be a great member, and it was passed out last week.
Yeah.
Can you pull up the Hey, go ahead.
This is precisely the position I really don't want us to be in, and this is not personal at all. And I understand you're a great person, and I would love to work with you in some capacity. But I feel like it is not appropriate that we need to resolve this once and for all and have a formal procedure. I hate being in this position. We forced through a vote last month, and I feel like we need to resolve this, have our process put together. I don't think it's true that we don't have contacts to strong youth representation here. That's not a completely accurate. Well, I mean, okay. Well, let's. All right. Well, I will talk about how the networking happens, and I do agree we can diversify in that direction more. But anyway, please don't let us be in the position of preempting, putting some protocols in place that finally clear it up, while also making a person still feel welcome. And let's just do this right.
Yeah. Can I?
I'm going to say something real quick because I will have to say that I'm a little bit frustrated, slightly, and it has nothing to do with Candy or the vote. I just think what happened last month is being mischaracterized because I don't think there was a force or a rush, and it certainly wasn't articulated. It certainly wasn't articulated by anyone last month that they felt like they were rushed or forced into this. And the other part that I want to add is that we've been talking about process and we've gotten caught in the process for months and months and months and months now. And I just don't think if we have someone qualified, whether it's Candy or anyone else, that we should be bogged down by waiting for some process to develop when we've actually been meandering through a process, trying to develop a process for months. And I feel like we're just kind of stuck on a dirt road somewhere that's 3 inches deep in mud, and we just haven't moved along, and we keep spinning our wheels and we get further and further in the mud. At some point we have to do something instead of just kind of hanging out here and waiting for something to happen. So I understand how you feel, but I feel like it's one of those times where I have to exercise, or at least have my voice heard, that I don't think that where we are now and being overly stuck with processes serving us any good at this point.
I don't feel it was rushed last time at all, and I think we need to give Candy the same opportunity we gave this gentleman last time. Let her get up and speak for herself. I like to see, I think we need, to me, this is a working document. It needs to be fluid. This will be ongoing throughout the existence of this committee and this organization. Given that, or being that said, I'd like to see more residents on this advisory council, maybe 64, whatever the split may be. But we have an individual here right now that's willing to step up and help us with this committee, move it forward. So let's give this individual an opportunity to speak. And then let's vote on it. Go from there.
I think, Armando, I agree with you. I'm sorry, Candy, I did not read your letter. And also, I want to say to our new member, and this is terrible, your name is Jim. Sorry. I want to apologize, kind of, that we made you feel like we rushed to accept you. I don't agree. I don't think that was the situation last month. I think we had a pretty thorough vetting and welcome. And Candy, I really greatly admire your work, and I enjoyed. We talked last night and had a very good conversation. So I would agree with Armando that if Candy, in lieu of me reading her letter, if you wanted to just say a few words why you want to be here, you might contribute. That would be great.
Are you going to do an introduction, John, or?
I just want to, I'm not going to make a comment, and Elizabeth directed at your statement. However, I think that we've got to raise above the issues that are going to be coming up and move on with our business. And I don't see any reason to wait any longer, since we have the person present tonight. She's been diligent. She's written a letter. I think she can say more for herself.
So my name is Candy Cedevaca. I'm a Swansea resident. My family's been in this neighborhood since the 40s. And I am very confident that what you're trying to do here is for the good of the committee, and processes are important. It reassures me that I'm joining a thoughtful group of people. However, this is a citizens advisory committee, and an invitation to the board is not exactly what I need, because I am a citizen and I'll be here regardless, which is why I have shown up. And so I plan to continue coming to the meeting. If you choose to give me a voice at this table, I would appreciate it, but I'll be here regardless, so thank you.
Joan? Yeah, watch the cord. Here, I can.
Lean across the table.
Well, I'll make it short. I would agree with Mondo about the way we select people here. I was brought into this organization by just attending meetings and giving some information and more or less giving my opinion on things. And I believe that most of the people here that have been selected to be on this committee are great people. And I think the selection process that was made then should be just as well, just as good as it is now.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to clarify that we ran out of time last meeting and it was a rushed vote, and I thought it was disrespectful because we didn't get to do the best welcome, so I want people to understand what I was talking about there. I also accept totally the desire to put an excellent person on, and I would welcome Candy. And I want us, I don't want us to forget that we are trying to clarify this process, and that's part of Terrence. One of the reasons we keep going back and forth is because the way we do this is we kind of approach a process and then we back off and we kind of use the informal. So that's fine. I'm down with what the group wants to do, and I would certainly support Candy being on here. But please, let's recognize we're doing two things at once here. We're trying to clarify it, and then we keep falling back on it, and we will continue to be in this position until we answer all of those questions.
Ann, did you want to say something? Ann made a motion. It was seconded by Mickey. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, signify by saying no. Seeing that motion carries both. Collective speaker. So, is there any more comment or discussion on this particular topic? If not, Maria.
Let me just say it. Can I reach? Yeah. Let me just say, and to AE, first of all, welcome, Candy. We do believe, and we've heard it loud and clear. All of you guys have given us great input. The only reason you don't have a comprehensive document is because we haven't finished talking to everybody. It will absolutely be back on the agenda. Our intent is that we can meet with the 6 additional people before the roundup of the agenda comes out, so we can have a document attached to the agenda prior to the meeting next week, so you don't get it cold. Not next week, I'm sorry, next month, so that you don't get it cold and you have time to review it and input it, so we can have a robust discussion. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So we'll close out this part. We're almost out of time for this evening, so this is pretty good. So we have actually Eric and Kelly with NWC-CAC updates.
So we will be brief, and hopefully I'm going to ask Barbara Cromwell to come up and just give a very quick update on the historic work she's been doing and an ask of the committee and of the community. And then I'll close out, Eric and I'll close out on some of the BCC stuff.
With NWC-CAC. I just have a quick update on the historic preservation work. We submitted our application for the landmark designation for the Stadium Arena, and that can be found online. It's available for the public to review it, so I highly recommend that you all review it. It's on denvergov.org and then landmark preservation. You can find it there, and we can send the link. The public hearing for that designation will go to the Landmark Preservation Commission on Tuesday, March 15th at 1 p.m. in the Webb Municipal Building. We'd love to have members of the CAC show up and show their support. I'll also be reaching out to you to ask for letters of support. And then I have, let's see, where's that? I also have a form to fill out for letters of support for our grant application. You know what, I'll just show it for now. Last month we talked about for our grant application for the State Historical Fund, they really want to see creative ways of showing community support for the project. And so we'll have some standard letters of support, but we also have made these forms to fill out that kind of talk about the rehabilitation, the historic rehabilitation of the stadium arena, and then have a space here to write out why someone might support the rehabilitation, the historic renovation of the stadium arena. And we have these in English and Spanish. So that's part of phase 2 for the historic preservation work, where we are doing additional studies on the stadium arena after it becomes a historic landmark that will determine the structural and financial feasibility of reusing the arena for, right now the intended use is a public market. So I have these forms with me tonight. If you work with residents directly, I would love for you to take some and hand them out, and then I'll work with you later to collect them so that we can include them in our grant application. And I think that's it for tonight.
Great, thanks, Barb. And I'll be quick on a couple of other updates. And I'm just going to deal with the most immediate things relative to NWC-CAC work. So one is, as you know, RTD is opening the first of its 3 commuter rail lines. Super exciting. And A-line, which is the line that goes from DUS out to the airport, will open in April. Celebrations are being planned for the 38th and Blake station, as well as the 40th in Colorado. We will push out more information about, we really do want this to be a community celebration. So engaging these communities, your communities, in that, what I think can be a really transformative, one of the themes in the neighborhood plans is being connected. And this is the first of many new connections that links Globeville or Swansea back to the rest of the city. So that's the first that opens. Then we have the Gold Line with the 41st and Fox that'll open later in 16. And then ultimately in 2018, the North Metro line. So lots to look forward to on RTD's work. The second is Brighton Boulevard. The first phase of Brighton Boulevard work will commence here in the not too distant future. We're going to start with utility relocations, which will be it's going to be kind of a wave of work, but getting those utilities moved will be a big task. So that'll be the first wave, and again, Hewitt is the lead for us on that work, and we have a whole communications team that we're standing up to help kind of unfold the work around Brighton. The last is, I guess, more specific to the NWC-CAC and my role. We are actively and aggressively pursuing my replacement as the new executive director of the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative, which is an appointee of the mayor. We have a team within the city that's leading that effort. The chief of staff for the mayor is leading that effort, and we are identifying candidates and the goal is here by the end of this first quarter is to find my replacement. But my transition from the NWC-CAC to the new office is going on. We are standing up our team. Gretchen is my deputy. Eric is leading construction for us. Erica Martinez, who many of you know, is coming over to run communications for our team. We are standing up a great team within the city to help lead this project forward. So I'm feeling very confident about that. And obviously, and I think, Amy, to your point, we'll come back in March and talk a little bit about how does the CAC fit into the two subcommittees, and ultimately how does that roll up to the Executive Oversight Committee, who's charged with advancing this project from a decision-making standpoint. So we'll walk folks through as well as the work plan. So my goal would be in March is that we essentially can walk you through the 2016 work plan from now to the end of the year. And actually, our calendar actually will be from February through January. And why that's important is we're going to use every year's stock show. With almost 700,000 people coming to the site, how do we celebrate the advancement of this project with folks from all over the country coming to the stock show? So we'll lay out that plan and want your feedback to make sure that we've captured the big buckets for moving this project forward. And with that, I am done. Yes. The Mayor's Chief of Staff is Janice Sinden, S-I-N-D-E-N. Armando.
I just want to thank everybody. This past Tuesday we had a fundraiser coordinated by our councilman here, Albus Brooks, and we did raise over $40,000. And I think it just exemplifies what this committee is all about. And that's about working with the community, and that's Paul Allen was kind enough to allow us to use this club room. Many individuals, Gretchen, Marie, Nancy, Vern, AE, all youth, which is nice as, and thanks to you, Garden Place is moving to another level.
And Armando, for those of us that couldn't attend, and if we want to contribute, how can you get us information so that we can make a contribution? Okay.
Just to let everybody know, our dear friend Betty Cram took a fall, and she's at home on a walker for about 6 weeks. She just chipped a little bone in her hip. She's going to be fine. If folks want to send her a card or say hi, and I kind of encourage people to call her after 10 and before 4. She wishes she could be here tonight. I am taking her copies. So.
I forgot to acknowledge Liz Adams, who did a wonderful job spearheading that event on Tuesday as well. Gracias.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order?
No.
So Liz asked me to give some updates about the Starbuzz hearing. This is the marijuana facility on the corner of 47th and Brighton. They have a grow license in addition to their retail license. Like Paul Andrews mentioned before, a lot of us were at the original retail license one, but that was the safety and well-being hearing, which is a little bit different. So they actually gave us a date, which Liz just showed me. I hadn't seen it yet. It's March 23rd at 6 p.m. And that's the hearing just for the grow facility because it's in a non-conforming grow. It's in an IMX zone, and you're not supposed to grow marijuana in IMX. So we have to collect signatures, and we'll be doing that, at least 10 signatures within the 5-block radius of the area, and then we'll hopefully a lot of people want to come and testify.
Nancy, would I add anything? Do you guys want to add anything?
Wednesday, March 2nd at 1:30 will be the City Council's working session on the marijuana issues. And Robin Kanish has put out an initial proposal about saturation. And so they're taking public comment at that, and there will be more opportunities for public comment. And this is just a very minute part of the overall issues with the marijuana process. So if anyone, I don't know, you can go on the website and find that link. I guess it's called Siri link or something that shows the documents from the last week's meeting. So get your comments to your council people.
He's right there.
Yeah.
We're opposed.
I think Juliana.
We're opposed.
So just want to extend the invitation from the Grow House for our annual seed swap happening on March 12th. The hours are 10 to 7, and we're located at 47th in York. Everyone is welcome to attend. As always, residents can attend at no cost. So I don't think we have any flyers today, but we'll have it shared and posted everywhere. So there'll be workshops, there'll be good food. You can take seeds and find new seeds and start planting your garden, all that good stuff. It's that time of year.
Anybody else?
Are we good?
The mic is closing. Good night, be safe. We'll see you next month.
Armando? I need to talk to Armando.